So he's going to take it to the documentary maker and be like, hey, I got this tip for you. You want to give me some tip or take some of my tip? Whatever. Welcome back to Shat on TV, True Detective, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO series, True Detective. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, alongside my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And the King B.
Do I look like a man with answers?
And this is our deep dive edition where we look back on this week's episode of True Detective and provide our thoughts and analysis. And in a stroke of amazing timing, we have just discovered that Mahershala Ali has gone 2 for 2 for the Best Supporting Actor Oscar.
Yeah, and the best film. So both Moonlighting and Green Book. Do you think that there were people in HBO sitting there being like, please, mention True Detective. Just mention that the finale's on tonight.
Did he mention it?
No, he didn't. But I'm saying, do you think they were hoping there was even a little chance?
I mean, that would have been epic if Mahershala Ali walks up there and goes, why are you watching this shit? Go watch something good, like the finale of True Detective, one of the best finales of any TV show ever made.
Or if he walked up like Wayne having one of his senior moments. Kind of looked around, didn't know why he was there, shuffled off stage.
Yeah, I think Clint Eastwood already covered that base.
Yeah. It would have been funny for him to come up and say, yeah, I know I did a good job, but that film was awful. What am I doing here?
Here we are. The ride is over. It's 8 weeks of True Detective, and this week's episode, Now Am Found, is the finale. A lot of people always say reserve your judgment until you've seen the complete story played out. I think with True Detective, that's truer than ever. What'd you think of this finale?
I got to say, I'm honestly very surprised and very satisfied. I think for the first time, they chose a grounded, emotionally genuine conclusion. There was no series of great M. Night Shyamalan twist reveals. There was no giant conspiracy. Not everybody was gay. It was just an unfortunate series of events that got put in motion by characters and their different motivators in life, you know, whether it was family, money, power. It was realistic. It could have happened. And we had all the parts of the puzzle right in front of us, and we just overthought it. And for me, it was an emotionally impacting episode because it took a second to slow down, and I was more than satisfied.
I don't know if the way things played out was for the reasons that a lot of people interpreted. I think there was a mystery out there to be solved, and they really wanted to give you that. So not completely change the tone of the show, but also at the end, bring it all together with some clear answers so that you could focus on what was important, right? So if you have these questions all lingering out there, if you're worried about the twists and turns, then that's where your focus is. You're looking at the left hand when the right hand has the real story there. I was deeply impressed. This episode changed things up. It did things that we have not seen from True Detective before. And after 3 seasons, that's really tough to do. TV shows put in that position often will give you some of their worst because they're just trying to do something inventive. Some things that were added in this episode, the string score. I don't know if you guys noticed from the get-go in the opening scenes between Hayes and Ed Hoyt, there's very dramatic string score that continued throughout the episode. They wasted no time. I was like, how are they going to wrap this all up in an hour? They got right to the conversation between Hoyt and Hayes in the forest, wasting no time, but never did it feel rushed. I felt like the pacing felt very even. The confrontation between Hoyt and Hayes was nothing like I expected. When we were talking after episode 7, I was like, oh, it's going to be this menacing, very terrifying thing, or it's going to be an explosive conversation. And it was a conversation that was nothing like I expected, but still incredibly powerful. And then we got some really nice stylistic touches. And the one that really hit me hard was when that camera was sweeping around the car and Roland and Wayne were in there, and it was spanning the 3 decades seamlessly like that. Normally, I would dismiss that as a cheap camera trick, but I felt genuinely sad that the ride with these two was over. I realized at that point how attached I'd become to these two characters. It was just a gorgeous episode overall.
Yeah, I think the both of you are right. You know, in the beginning, we were all maybe a little nervous about which True Detective was going to rear its head the third time around. You know, those thoughts were put to bed pretty quick. We were never given anything familiar enough to make us say, oh, this is going to be this thing or that thing. Ultimately, the third season is almost its own animal entirely, you know, outside of season 1 and season 2. And maybe that's the point of an anthology series, is that you're not going to get the same thing each time around. So ultimately, what a great gift.
And I hate to focus on specifically the ending of the ending, but that seems to be the conversation that's been going on social media right now. And it seems to be almost a straw man argument. Lots of people are coming in and saying, hey, we really enjoyed the ending of True Detective Season 3, unlike those other people who don't appreciate this type of an ending, or it surprised us and the mainstream audience isn't going to appreciate the way we hardcore appreciate it. But yet I haven't seen anybody who's actually saying this is a shitty ending to a show. Were you guys satisfied with the ending?
I think that fan culture being what it is, people really want to overcomplicate things. And they're looking for that deeper, twisty, turny narrative or that bigger mystery. They also really want to be contrary when it doesn't give them what they want. And this show, it didn't give you that. I mean, ultimately, we're getting a pretty simple kind of whodunit story that you find out who done it. There were times in the season that I'd complained, hey, I want more from this, but not for the right reasons, that there just wasn't enough going on. But ultimately, I was wrong to want that because I think the show really knew what it was doing. The big confrontation here that we were all expecting to be this hyper dangerous event was just another kind of confused guy just wanting this problem to go away in his own way. The second confrontation, which we think is going to be a big, scary, serious deal, just kind of amounts to everyone going, well, this fucking sucks, and shrugging their shoulders and walking away. And ultimately, those two things that the fans weren't really looking for and weren't really asking for were the best fit for the story. That final scene, the family kind of comes together in its final form. And, we're given a little bit of a reminder to what Wayne still has to look forward to. That's just what the story is.
It's been universally accepted, if not, let's just say loved, in that it gave everybody a little bit of what they like. Everybody got almost complete closure on the case. You had some emotionally genuine moments that connected with the characters on screen and us as viewers. And then at the end, it left you a little ambiguity as to what are we seeing. There still is some question that it's left open for people to see what they want in it. But for me, the ending was the most satisfying in the quieter moments. Once the case is kind of put aside and Hayes and Roland are standing there at Julie's grave, apologizing, I found myself getting kind of emotional, surprisingly. And I looked at the clock. I said, there's 20 minutes left. I said, holy shit, where is this going to go? And then the reveal. So there was a partial reveal, which was there was another layer to the mystery. And when Purple goes up and he forgets sitting in his car why he's there, and he's confronted with the answer, the closure that he really needs, and the knowledge of Julie's fate, that she was okay, that they don't have to carry this on their shoulders anymore. I felt like we were along with him for the ride. And it was at the end. It wasn't about the case. It was more about them and their relationship. And I felt like all those times in the car, we were with them. So whatever you wanted in the finale, I think you had some in this.
We just recently watched and recorded Dune for Shat the Movies podcast, our sister podcast. And in watching that, Big D, you and I were a bit critical of it. Carrie, not so much. But we talked about art for art's sake, and that if you're not at all interested in what the audience thinks or entertaining the audience, then you're only doing half the job, right? You're making something beautiful, but it doesn't make sense to anyone. No one actually enjoys it, right? I am amazed at the way this season of True Detective really brought things together in a way that was artistic and left a lot open to interpretation, but at the same time gave you very satisfying answers, close things up for you. And it reminds me of season 1. People hail season 1 as the holy grail of the show, or like the best this show can get. And in season 1, if you remember, after all the shooting went down with the big bad, and you've got Marty and Rust in the coming out of the hospital and stuff, and they're looking up at the stars and pontificating about life. That was pretty wrapped up in a bow too. I mean, these guys were. It was very heartwarming, very optimistic sort of view of things. And even with Rust coming on the verge of finding something close to spiritualism.
It's Marty's final line in that when Rust says, they're still out there and, they're still doing what they're doing. And Marty goes, yeah, and we ain't going to get them, but we got ours, is I think a really great line that kind of encapsulates that feeling. Like, you're not going to get every answer, but you get the one that you need.
Absolutely. And in an age of guess it TV, I think what was amazing is the show changed the conversation, right? So there's shows like Westworld that are trying to always stay one step ahead of Reddit, one step ahead of everybody who's guessing with their theories. And we were kind of asking, like, is this show going to be clever enough to stay ahead, or should it not worry about it? And what it did was something completely different. Is Nic Pizzolatto looked at all the options that could be left in storytelling and goes, it doesn't have to be this or that. And the audience is going to tell me what my options are. I'm going to do something that's completely different. And what he did was he didn't leave all the threads loose. He tied most of them up, but he also wasn't predictable because they explored avenues we hadn't imagined in tone, in presentation. I thought that final walk into the jungle was a beautiful metaphor. And it answered another question for me that was unsolved, which was throughout the series, Wayne is always looking at himself between time frames and there's nobody there. To me, that means he was never there, that he as a person was never completely there, that there's always been an absence in his life, and that absence is him. But looking online, you can see dozens of different interpretations of why those things occurred. And I think that's wonderful as far as a conversation starter.
It's also a journey for Wayne, where his wife in one of the visions refers to the hardening of his heart. And I thought it was a biblical passage that he had kind of locked out everything that loved him or that he loved. This season, if anything, is a transition from the hard Wayne that came back from war to finally letting go. We've seen him repent. He's going back and he's trying to mend fences, even though he doesn't remember it all the time. He's repairing the relationship with Roland. And as he lets the case go, and I think that final memory of his wife when they're reconciling, or his girlfriend at the time, reconciling in the bar, and then him walking into the jungle is almost like where he's letting go of that old haze. It's nice to see him soften, let the case go, and that allows him to do what's important. He reconnects with his daughter. He reconnects with his family, and he's sitting on the porch there. And you can say it's a happy, feel-good bow tie ending. To me, it just felt genuine and real, and it made me forget about the case and more think about the journey we had been on with these two incredible actors.
Yeah, when you think about it from that perspective in this ending, people are like, oh, so it all just worked out and he's sitting on the porch and everybody's together. It didn't all just work out. Horrible things happened. People got away with things. A lot of people died. It was a horrible, sad story. And the only way they could deal with it is to let go, like you said.
And when his daughter, even though we've only seen her now on screen, maybe 2 minutes total, that line, she says, I miss you too, Dad, and I miss you right now. Holy shit. Talk about having like some impact on screen for like bang for the buck for that little time. Amazing.
I thought about that quite a bit, as you were mentioning, everything being tied up in a neat little bow at the end and reunited with his daughter. It seems to me maybe they aren't as estranged as we really thought. I mean, it goes back into us kind of assuming that everything is this big, deep, horrible thing. I kind of got the impression ultimately it's just really hard for this woman to watch her dad kind of slowly disintegrate. And that's what she meant by, I miss you right now. The reason she doesn't come around is she doesn't want to watch what's happening. It's not that complicated. It's a really common and really relatable thing that happens to people all over the place everywhere. We were thinking it was going to be some big dire mystery, but in fact, it's just how people operate.
And when you look at the emails that came in for the watch, what's amazing is how this episode changed the conversation. For 7 weeks, we've been getting emails in that are just tinfoil and theories. And these emails this week came in and they're all about, what is this show about? What are these characters feeling? Even the depths of exploration between relationships between fathers and their daughters. I mean, it's really, really heavy stuff. And it's incredible with one episode that satisfied us, but also changed the conversation. But it begs the question, what was this season actually about?
The case of the two missing children, that's the narrative that gets us from point A to point B. That holds the whole case together. But for me, it's what do people value in life and how they intersect. This is like Crash, not to talk about a bad Academy Award winning movie, Best Picture, but how a lot of unfortunate series of events and people's motivators in their own flawed lives can intersect at a point and just cause unpredicted or unintended consequences. You have Lucy, who's driven by money. For God's sake, she almost willingly sells her daughter off. Then you have Hoyt, who's considering family as his main driver, and he'll do anything to protect and keep his family whole. Then you have power with Gerald Kint, who will do anything to become more powerful within the state and running for office. He doesn't care who he wrongfully accuses, how many lives he destroys. And then you have Hayes, who's bottled up and controlled by a need to be independent, to be on his own, to not depend or love anyone. And then you have the last two final ones, which would be respect for Amelia, that she wants to do something that matters and be seen for who she is. And Watts, who does a lot of fucked up things. I mean, he helps keep a child imprisoned, but it's love that keeps him doing it and drives him to the end. So for me, it's all those things, and that people can find their own flaws in their drivers. And that intersection just destroyed how many lives, how many people died. And for me, I think that's what it is.
For me, it was about letting go. And it presents itself first in that conversation between Hoyt and Hayes. Hoyt does something that I did not see coming at all. And it was such a simple thought. He didn't have to come up with some elaborate way to keep Hayes quiet. He didn't have to go through any great lengths. I mean, he's got 2 carloads of dudes, clearly. So, I mean, he could have a guy killed if he wanted and have him disappear, and it's not a big deal. He's got GPS beeper on Harris James so he can find him. He knows what the score is. And his proposition is simple. He's like, you keep looking for Julie, then I'll have people keep looking for Julie. You let her go, and I let her go. That's it. You want her to be safe? You just let it go. She only needs to be silenced if she's being sought. If she's never found, then we have no problem here. And that's echoed when Wayne is having that conversation with Amelia when he's talking about quitting being a cop, when he's talking about letting go of all this. And he has this beautiful line that for me sums up how everyone moves past this crime and moves past this tragedy. And he says, let's put this thing down. It's not ours. And he's absolutely right. His involvement with the crime, the extent of it, he should just do his job. His obsession with it at that point goes beyond reason, where if there isn't a political will and the legal will and the professional will to get this thing solved, that's not on him. And same with Amelia, that she's not just writing about it because it's a story that needs to be told. As you said, Big D, all these people are pursuing the thing that they value in life through this crime. So, early in the season, I talked about how Amelia was basically despicable for being a parasite, for she was feeding off this crime. Wayne is feeding his need off of this crime as well. And, Kent is feeding his need off of this crime. And so, it all boils down to people not being able to let this thing go that they don't own. The only people who own this crime are the people who actually paid the price for it, the victims of the crime.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say up until about 15 seconds ago, I didn't really feel there was a singular moral or theme. I just enjoyed a great story with a couple of laughs and some looming dread and complicated characters. And typically, I don't really feel a story has to boil down to a this means that thing for it to be a strong story. We get to watch it unfold, and we get to walk alongside these people and see what they see, and that's what it's all about. But Gene, the idea of letting go does apply to so many characters, and it is kind of a really fascinating thing. As you spoke about that, I have to wonder, do you think Hoyt maybe knows what happens to Julie in the end? That he knows that maybe she does kind of carry on beyond just being buried at a convent? Or, I mean, because ultimately his goal is to keep this thing quiet. His name, his business, his empire, he just wants to shield that. Nothing else really matters. He doesn't need to be malicious about it. It's, it's like putting down a dog for him.
It's not that clean a cover up. I'm sorry. Like putting a tombstone on the ground, like there's no death certificate. I thought it was going to get much darker where that like they were going to put a body in place for her, like somebody who didn't mean much or something like that, like some orphan. So I'm glad they didn't go that direction. But I think if Hoyt is still around, he definitely knows. I don't think that there's any part of it's hidden from him. He doesn't want Julie to be found, but he also doesn't want Julie to be found.
If Watts was able to find what eventually happened and that Julie ended up at the convent and that she supposedly had HIV, there's no doubt that Hoyt and his team, whether it's Harris James or the group of investigators, they would have found out. And remember that Hoyt's intentions were not malicious. He wanted to keep his family whole. and to give his daughter a chance to recuperate and be herself. I do have that feeling that he knew ultimately what happened, and he was more protecting her than the company business, because at that point he said, I've got nothing. Family's gone. I've got nothing to protect. I think Julie to him was that last bit of his daughter and his granddaughter and his family and the memories, that's what he was protecting. Because he doesn't even come out and threaten Purple's family. He could have done that. He could have said, hey, do I need to feel threatened? He could have come right out and said, listen, you either stop right now or your family's going to disappear. And to me, it tells you that he knew what had ultimately happened, and he was trying to protect her all along.
One of the other powerful themes of this season, and specifically this episode, is about relationships. So we see relationships that really we get a full picture of. And Nic Pizzolatto seemed to very slowly over the course of these 8 episodes flesh out these links between Wayne and Amelia, between Wayne and Roland. And I want to focus on that first one first, because as I was watching this episode, and we've had listeners like Kenny P write in about this too, I don't know if we're supposed to feel sympathetic toward Amelia, and I do understand her a little bit more now, but I'll be frank, like, she's the type of woman who infuriates me, and I think that I'm a bit blinded by that. The conversation that she's having where she's like, nobody talks to me that way, but then she shows up and she's like, but I'm going to make excuses for you anyway. For you guys, like, is there a person who's right between Amelia and Wayne? Is somebody right in this argument or this debate?
No, I think they're both wrong. I think they walk that fine line in a lot of shows, like in The Walking Dead. I'll admit I used to love the show. I read the comic books. Lori Grimes is one of the most hated female characters in television history. She was just insufferable. And then you have Skylar White, another one that it's universally despised. Amelia walks that line, and you can realize she's flawed. Wayne's flawed, and you're able to fluctuate back and forth. There were episodes in the beginning I was like, Amelia's terrible. She's the worst. Poor Wayne. Then I'd be like, poor Amelia. Wayne's a fucking bastard. He's a dick. I went back and forth, and at the end, I think they're just both strong characters who are incredibly flawed, both defensive, both having emotions for each other, but again, both tied. Their relationship is based upon this horrible crime. So I think they both bear equal weight in this fucked up relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I don't really have much to add, honestly. You hit the nail on the head. I don't think that either one of them is right or wrong. They're just two human beings, and that's how those two human beings would interact.
In the VFW scene between Wayne and Amelia, he basically tells her, like, look, there's parts of my job that I should have made that clear to you that I just can't talk about. It's not something I can share with you. It's for your own good, blah, blah, blah. Do you guys think it's okay to expect your partner to trust you that much? Because to me, I was with him and I was like, look, if she trusts you, she trusts you. If she doesn't, she doesn't. But at the same time, I'm like, that's such a get out of jail free card if you just say, oh, it's my job,
If my wife Vanessa came out and saw me burning my clothes at 3 a.m, there's no way I'm getting away without giving an answer. But this is the same woman that if I came home and said, listen, something terrible happened, get a shovel, I need some help, she's calling the police on me. So I can't fault her for not accepting his line. I'm kind of surprised she toes the line as long as she does. I think it's reasonable for her to say, no further. You promised me this morning you're going to tell me it all. Tell me it all. And you got to give it up. You can't keep that shit secret anymore.
I mean, the troubled crime detective is kind of a TV trope at this point. And I think hundreds of them have said to their significant others, listen, there's parts of this job you don't want to hear about. How many times have we heard about the baby in a microwave story from every bad crime show? In fact, I'm 99% sure that happened in the first season of True Detective.
Also in Heat.
And Heat. You know what? Can we get a maybe a little online fact-finding mission to go? Everyone send in your stories about babies found in microwaves.
Maybe it's like the Wilhelm scream. Cop shows are required to put it in there.
I think that the trope of the secretive detective is the same with the soldier suffering from PTSD who wakes up in a cold sweat and won't tell his wife what happened. Yes, I understand that happens, but when you're in a relationship for this long a period of time, I think those walls break down and you start to reveal what's going on through the cracks.
I'm glad you brought up the soldier angle, Big D, because there's a line that Amelia drops on Wayne in the bar that blew me away as far as her actual care for him and what she says to him. And he tells her that she's the smartest person he knows. She says, You could have been good at just about anything, but what you think you are, it made you stuck. And that unlocked the entire character of Wayne for me, because his life is just as lost as Julie's. Both of these are poor kids that were transformed by what this machine did to them, right? So in a sense, Julie comes from poverty. Her mother thinks there's something better for her and, basically rents her out to the Hoyts. At the same time, Wayne, he says his mom told him that he should go, join the military. And he knew that if he died, she'd get $10,000, and that would make her rich by their standards. It was just such an amazing line. And again, this is that economy of scripting that we've talked about. Really brilliant work.
Yeah, whether Wayne is in the military or in the police force, he's driven by a sense of duty. That guides everything he's done. And for most of his life, he's been bound by whether it's his mother or what he feels is the right thing to do. And only when he finally says, let's let go, let's both move past this case, that does he kind of take off the shackles and he's free.
It does kind of bum me out that when she delivers that line that you could be good at everything you do, and he kind of acquiesces and agrees with her. And then I think it cuts to the next scene and he shows up at the fucking steno pool getting ready to sit down at a room full of typewriters. Could be good at anything, just going to go and do this one horrible thing he doesn't want to do.
Oh. 10 years in the information office, that's a death sentence. That's like prison for Hayes. How could he do 10 years? They had marital strife. 10 years at that desk job typing for poor Wayne, that'll do it.
I got a little anxiety listening to all those typewriters clacking away. So I can just imagine what 10 years would do.
Yeah.
In this episode, we see that Roland tried to keep Wayne out of that information office by trying to cut him a deal, basically, with the brass at the police station, essentially saying that, look, file a retraction, combat the story that Amelia published back in the 80s. And he refuses to do it. But it really shows kind of that relationship between these two men. And I think that's the other relationship that we should explore, the other big relationship in this episode.
Yeah, a lot of times with shows like this, where you have police detectives in a car, and they're partners. Their relationship doesn't go more than superficial, layer deep into friendship. They're with each other because it's kind of what you do on a daily basis. The sadness that Roland shows when Hayes chooses that desk job and to break up the partnership, it was genuine to me. There was a connection that he felt with him that bound them for the rest of their lives for over 30 some odd year span. And that argument that they have the first time when the two, they meet in 2015 and they're angry over something, it's almost the loss of that bond and that friendship. And it was so nice to see at the end come full circle, where they kind of let it go, and to see Roland ask him after the case, says, you going to be okay? You mind if I come stay with you for a bit? He cares about his friend. He wants to make sure he's okay, that he's not going to take that pistol and shoot himself. And there's a genuine bond between those old friends that for me was just fantastic to see come full circle over 8 episodes.
There's a little bit of selfishness in there. Roland, regardless of what your theories on who he is and what he's about, it's clear that guy is also kind of a solitary guy, and he feels this kinship with Hayes as a result of whatever is in each of them separately sets them apart from others. And I think that there's that bond in that Roland feels, and he knows that without Hayes, he's going to be more alone than he was before, regardless of, his relationship status with his fiance or whatever, and whether she's sticking around. The only relationship that Roland really has that he values is the one that he has with Hayes.
Yeah, and I think there's a jealousy that he has over Hayes' family. How many times do we hear them snap back and forth? In this episode, when they're old and they're down in the basement, and Roland asks, why didn't you tell me about your meeting with Hoyt? He said, I had a family I had to think of. He was, oh, that'd be nice. So in that friendship, maybe also Roland got the family he never got himself. When he's sitting on that porch, he's now kind of a bigger, nuclear family or expanded family. Or what do they call it? What's not expanded? What is it where you start getting different generations and relatives and
a jamboree?
Extended family?
I guess extended.
A jamboree.
Jamboree. Whatever it is, Roland finally has that family he's always seeked.
It looks like a reverse of the opening sequence of The Jerk.
Oh, yes, it really does. Yes. Yeah.
There's a scene. It's a real quiet scene in this show, in this episode, when Roland and Wayne pull up at Junius's house, and Roland turns to Wayne and he goes, all right, now don't get carried away. And they both walk out with their pistols out.
Yeah.
For like no reason. Just an old man like feeding chickens. It's great. But again, yeah, these this relationship between these two guys is a very deep bond. And also, fuck this show for having this ominous string section during all the scenes after they say goodnight. Because I kept thinking like, oh God, oh no, what are they going to do? Like I was filled with dread for a good 10 minutes this episode. Between this and when Wayne is driving his car, I was like, oh no. And again, I think it's really great because then when you do get the happy ending, you're like, I wanted this. Like I really did want this.
Yeah, we didn't know we wanted it, but in the end, we wanted it.
Yeah, I thought the notion of two 70-year-old dudes going to shake someone down was kind of funny, and it's clear they weren't going to risk another Harris James incident.
I almost want to get a spin-off of this, like these two old guys playing detective, because when they first pull up to the Hoyt mansion and he cuts the lock, Hayes says to Roland, what are we supposed to do if somebody catches us? And Roland goes, we're old. We'll just say we're confused. I was like, yes, more of these two guys out on the prowl.
Also, it takes Wayne like an hour to get back to the car, which is fantastic.
All right, if we're really pushing this pitch for a spinoff between Old Man Roland and Old Man Hayes, we got to get Mr. June to summarize or narrate every case that they go on, because that guy was succinct and to the point and really filled you in on everything that had been going on.
Yeah, if they just questioned him at the beginning, this could have all been solved very, very quickly.
If fucking Amelia had gotten his name and they found him back in 1990, that would have saved a lot of pain over those 10 years.
If anyone had asked, well, what's season 3 about? You literally could just play his lines of dialogue and map the entire show out.
You mentioned, King B, that Roland would be alone without Hayes, or at least more alone. That brings us to Roland's partner in all this. So you've got Wayne and Amelia, you've got Hayes and West as well, but Roland, after this departure in the 80s, when these two go their separate ways, he's kind of thrown into a bit of despair. And this really highlighted for me the quality of inserting little facts about people, almost to the point where the character is so real that I have intuition about him. And that was best displayed when we saw Roland's bar fight. So he goes in the bar, he starts insulting a guy. You immediately know where this is going. You know he's starting to fight with the guy. But I don't know if he's trying to work a lead or anything else. And you realize that he's just doing it as a sort of like self-punishment. But what's weird is that this fight came out of nowhere. Nothing earlier in the season indicated that this scene would happen. And normally you'd be like, what the fuck was that all about? But knowing Roland after all this time, I kind of knew it was there the whole time. It's like a weird, like, I know the guy. That to me is the best of True Detective. And then they follow up with that dog scene. And if they hadn't put in all the hard work of slowly teaching us about Roland bonding with a dog would have seemed just like cheesy and out of place. He's like a people person that has no people. And it was really amazing to watch that 5 minutes unfold.
Yeah, Stephen Dorff, just to look at the guy, I go, oh, he's the guy from the Blade movie. He's stupid. Who cares? And when I first saw him in this, I was like, what's he just doing his best Dennis Quaid impression? He's stupid. Who cares? But this guy really brought a performance. I mean, he's kind of, to me, really like the unsung hero of this show. All the characters that have emotional burdens placed upon them in this show get the luxury of acting on them. They get to be petulant in there. Well, I don't care about my job or relationship. I'm going to solve this case. But Roland, he just keeps his head down, keeps to himself, and does what he's supposed to do. And he just has to bottle all this stuff up. He doesn't have that outlet. Ultimately, Dorff does an amazing job of pulling this off. And he does. He makes this completely realized character that you do really feel like you could kind of understand and sort of predict what he's going to be like.
Yeah, and I think season 1 was renowned for being part of the reconnaissance, the resurrection of McConaughey. Could we hope for something the same with Dorff? And if so, what would we call it? I just thought of this right now. The Dorff.
We'll have to get back to you on that one, Big T. But yeah, there does seem to be a lot of chatter on social media, especially among True Detective fans that are like, where is this guy from? Why did we not notice this talent before? can we get him more work? And he's not like super old. I think there's a lot of years left in this guy, and he might be one of those guys like James Caan that just took on a second phase of his career. So
hope so.
All right, guys, I want to do a quick lightning round of questions left unanswered. So things that we never really quite got clarity on, or at least I didn't. Maybe you can help me out with them. First of all, do we ever figure out what happened to Amelia? We see Wayne look at her as teaching at the university around 2000, and that's about the last we see of Amelia. Does anyone know what happened to her?
Cancer. That's my guess.
She won the lottery and left them all behind. No, she just died.
It's unimportant, to be honest.
Ultimately, I think that scene with him seeing her speaking, teaching at the university is kind of maybe meant to show that their relationship reached a point where it was good and they had good years together. And then beyond that, we know she's just not in the picture now, but that's not necessary to the story.
All right. The Purcell home, we see that it's burned down. We know that Tom left the Purcell home, later was found dead. How did it burn?
I think this is the Heisenberg Flophouse in Breaking Bad. This is all the local skateboarder kids who are sitting in there partying, smoking up, having sex. You drop your lighter after you've been shooting up some heroin. House goes up. That's what happened.
They say after the Woodard shooting, the town just wasn't the same. It was kind of coming apart. I think it just became one more abandoned building. And yeah, like you say, kids just burned it down. There might have been some graffiti because it was known that the guy who lived there a long time ago killed himself because he killed his kid or something like that. Just a neglected home.
We mentioned that the nuns didn't have a death certificate for Julie's body or Mary July's body. Mike Ardoin takes her as had been predicted by listeners, and she goes and lives with him. We see the kids riding on the bikes, the two kids riding by the Porsche, the black kids, and we saw this whole show start out with the two white kids on bikes. Is this ending too clean?
Too clean? No way. It's not a clean ending. Wayne doesn't know what happened. Roland doesn't know what happened. The daughter's distraught because her father's a shell of his prior self. Roland staying with his friend so he doesn't shoot himself. It's not clean. It's just we were left not wanting more. That doesn't make everything end in a perfect way. There's a lot of things that are wrong, but it was just satisfying, and we're kind of conflicted in that.
I mean, there is sort of a fairy tale element to it. The little boy who always thought he would marry the little girl recognizes her and on her journey back to mental health, is there to sort of be her touchstone. And I get why people would say that, but too clean? I don't think so. I will say that the corniest moment in the entire show or the entire episode was during that flashback retelling sequence from Mr. June. You got 7 nuns standing in a circle looking very determined, and they all just kind of look at each other and nod solemnly like, yeah, this is the right thing to do. That was a little ridiculous.
No, you want a bullshit clean ending? Hayes is sitting there watching the kids go by on the bike. It close up on his eye. He remembers who Julie was. He remembers she's alive. He turns around and says, Roland, we need to talk. That would have been bullshit. That he has this epiphany at the end. Him and Roland can finally let go and have release and realize they're not to blame for years of misery. That would have been too nice.
I was a little surprised they didn't immediately recognize the little girl because, I mean, there is a similarity, and then go, holy shit, her name's Lucy? Like her ma? So I guess when you're 70, maybe you just overlook that sort of thing.
We do see that Wayne, after visiting the Ardoin home, has the address of the home. That note, Henry takes it, so it's got the name of the landscaping company and the address. He looks at it, opens up a drawer. What the hell was that all about?
I thought there was a quick acknowledgement that he was going to throw it away. I think it was trash. When he read the name of the landscaping, there was almost an acknowledgement that he might have known something or was going to look into it.
One of the theories that I heard was that he was going to use it as currency to get laid again.
Oh.
So he's going to take it to the documentary maker and be like, hey, I got this tip for you.
Yeah, when he first takes it from Wayne's hand and just crumples it up immediately, I thought that was a little menacing. Like, oh my God, what does he know something his dad doesn't at this point? And now he's just part of the cover up. But then later when he kind of regards the note and shoves it in his pocket or in the drawer, that note is definitely going to that documentarian. There's no doubt in my mind. It's kind of like that message in a bottle sort of thing where you're given some little glint that ultimately this thing will get solved, just not with our heroes at hand.
No, you realize when you say solved, You mean destroying Julie's new life. It's not a mystery being solved. They're going to rip that girl out of anonymity and her small little oasis from the chaos of her old life, and she's going to get thrust back into it. That is the worst possible ending for this entire season.
I think that you're wrong. All the Hoyts are dead. There's no one really interested in the cover-up or maintaining the cover-up. Some Hollywood exec comes and offers her money to option her story. Now this family's wealthy beyond belief. Sure, things are going to be weird. There's going to be some celebrity, but with the news cycle being what it is, in 30 days, it'll be back to normal. She'll be gardening again.
Yeah, until Nancy Grace sets up a fucking tent in her front yard and TMZ's there. That's going to be a great ending. Terrible.
And finally, the elephant in the room, the jungle scene at the end. This has been flying around. I've read Vanity Fair, thought this was like sort of a Jacob's Ladder thing that you know, it was either a dream or Wayne in his death throes was imagining all this. I'm not buying that. How about you guys?
No, not at all for me. I think that was a metaphor for the last time that we saw Wayne. The Wayne that went into the jungle is not the Wayne that came out.
Yeah, that's exactly how I saw it too. Was basically we're looking back at a young Wayne who was complete and whole and had some semblance of a future ahead of him. And when he made it back, there was just parts of a person that can never put these things all together. That he was always going to be broken. And last time we see him. Or perhaps another interpretation was that this is him wading into what's left of his memories, right? This is the final shroud that he is diving deep into that cloud that is his dementia, and he'll never return.
Yeah, for me, it was just kind of checking in on like sort of the three most significant phases of Wayne's life. You know, there's this moment where there's a sort of reunion amongst him and his newly cemented family. Jumping back to the time when he did acquiesce to the fact that he would build a life with someone, that he didn't have to be so alone. And then back to a time where he truly was, I mean, not even alone, but just had resigned himself to dying out there to the point where he didn't exist. You know, so it's the notion of a point where he didn't exist, a time when he existed to a person and then to a family. I'll admit, when I first watched it, I just thought, oh my God, is he having a stroke right here? Is he just dying on the porch right now? And we don't know it. But I mean, who cares what it means? It was just beautiful to watch.
I think the scene right before that was more telling for me, where they're in the bar. It's after the breakup. And for most of the season, Hayes has been wondering, did I drive you away? Did I drive my daughter away, my wife? What have I done? In this little last memory, he remembers what made him and Amelia special. And I think he remembered that they had come to a place where they were going to grow and be together. And that little piece of happiness and remembering of who she was, he could see her face, was what let him let go. So I think that was a great significance. And I think it was a nice, peaceful, realistic segue to just kind of fade out into the white, to where people can see what they want. And it was nice, a nice change.
So fuck you, Vanity Fair, for bumming me out.
So I'm glad we can come to agreement on that. One of the things that isn't being debated is who's at fault for all of this. We have several characters that are all culpable in this horrible crime, from Junius Watts in acting out of love, all the way to Edward Hoyt acting for his family. So let's start with Mr. June. Is he a villain in this? Is he a victim in this? What do you guys think?
So I think he started out with love, that he was doing it out of loyalty to the family, and he saw the happiness that she brought. But God, he had all the pieces. The second that she turns up and she leaves, he helps her escape. She doesn't turn up at the meeting place. He should have ran to the press, get it out there, instead of spending 10 years trying to be a detective himself and locate her. Make this big news. Try to find her.
Fuck that. When Will cracks his head,
yes,
they don't put him in a car, take him to the hospital. They don't do any of that. They're just like, well, we better put him on this rock over here. Make it look like he's sleeping. And really, at that point, there's no crime committed. You could say it's an accident. You got Edward Hoyt as your dad. Like, you can make this all go away. So he really fucked up. And I'm glad that we got that wonderful line from Roland. when Junius Watts saying, I want to be punished, like take me in or kill me or whatever. And they said, we don't have the authority. And Roland just looks at the gun rack and says, you don't want to live with it? Fucking don't.
Yeah, exactly.
From Junius, let's turn to Lucy. So we didn't know up until this episode that she for sure had a role in all of this. Clearly, we see now that she was allowing the Hoyts to take her daughter out for payment. What do you think there?
I mean, for my money, she's the worst person on the show. I mean, she was just kind of a bar slag who was running around on our man Scoot. She wasn't interested in helping, her boss's daughter who had mental issues. Like, she was like, well, yeah, sure, for money. Her entire motivations were not necessarily, I don't think, financial, but just to be free of everything around her. She wanted to do what she wanted to do and was more than eager to, be free of any sort of like social shackle or responsibility.
Yeah, remember that this isn't like a play date that they were setting up. This woman at a company picnic comes running out of the building, yelling Mary at your child, thinking it's her dead child. And you're like, well, I mean, you want to give me money?
You can believe in the beginning that she was thinking about the kid's best interest when she was going to let her go to a better family. But once Will turns up dead, and then she knows where Julie is and accepts that backpack full of money so she can either smoke it or stick it in her arm. As a parent, you should always be there for your children. She has to be up there as one of the top two for me.
And you'll recall that it was Mr. June and Isabel's suggestion that she would have a better life. The notion of a better life was never part of Lucy's thought process.
Big D, I got to ask you as a dad, what would you charge to rent Emma out?
To rent her as like a replacement child?
Yeah, just, for pink room play dates and Dungeons and Dragons.
0.
Free?
No, there's no way she's going down there. And the notion that Will had to go along, like he's going to protect her. We see how well that worked out at their little stone playground. No, there's no way.
If anything in the show was too convenient, it was Will falling backward and hitting his head exactly on that one rock that was out there. That kid's got the shittiest luck ever.
Or a Play-Doh skull.
So Isabel is playing mom at this point rather than being the mom. How much is she to blame?
I mean, she's a loony tick. She's on lithium. Her mind is broken. I don't think she's in complete control of her faculties. Did she do something horrible? Yes. But does she really know what she's doing? That's debatable.
I really felt for Isabel at first. I was like, okay, she lost her husband and her child. She's trying to get some sense of normalcy. She just wants to be around this kid. Until they talked about the lithium, that she was drugging Julie for 10 years. I was like, nope, fuck her.
Yes, she's sick, but she knew enough to drug this poor child for 10 years. We can't let her off scot-free.
But in losing Julie, she ended up killing herself. That was the only thing keeping her alive, essentially.
Well, I don't think anybody in this whole Hoyt family really thought this out. When you're building a bunker, like a safe in your basement, what could go wrong?
Moving on to the next Hoyt, Edward Hoyt. So this is Isabel's dad, played by Michael Rooker. He is only presented in the finale of the season, but he does wield considerable power. Is he a villain in all of this?
He was on safari when the initial accident happened, so he didn't know what was going on. He then kicks into, defense mode and protect your child mode when he comes back. As horrible as it is to say, most parents would go above and beyond what anyone else would consider normal or reasonable to protect their children. Would I help cover up a crime for my daughter? I don't think so, but there's a possibility I might. So I can't fault him.
If I'm going to rule on this, I'm going to need to know when he returned and when he became aware of what had been going on. If he had returned after his daughter had committed suicide and learned about everything after the fact, then at that point he knows nothing's getting fixed. But he had started traveling way back when she was just completely grief-stricken. So we don't really know how much he knew of what was going on while it was happening.
Nothing happens on that estate without him having knowledge of it. I think he saw that as a way to get his daughter to return when she had those good days. And there's no way he went on safari for 10 years?
Yeah, my initial thought on Ed Hoyt was, look, this is a guy who has the power to set things right at any point, but doesn't. So any other character involved in this chain of events, they had a window in which they could have set things right. So like Mr. June, for instance, he could have done it right when the accident happened. But after that, doing anything would implicate himself, implicate Isabel. He's going to prison, right? if you look at Wayne and Roland, or Harris James with cover-ups or killing somebody, there's a point where you can no longer tell the truth without consequence. Edward Hoyt's power is so considerable that at any point he could have changed this around, right? He could have bought off the right people. He could have, set things straight, and he didn't. So at that point, I'm like, yeah, he's a villain. But then I look at the flip side of it and like, take a look at this man. As you said, King B, do I look like a man who's got answers? The toll that this has taken on this guy, you got to believe that this is not what Edward Hoyt started out as years ago, right? He's drinking. His daughter is dead. His wife is gone. He has no family. This estate is fallen into disrepair. And it's like, this man is broken. If he didn't have a conscience, if he was truly a bad man, it wouldn't take this kind of toll on him. Like he has lost everything. And even in his dealing with Wayne, although he is assertive, although he is firm, although he is mighty, he's not evil. He's not sadistic. And one of the people who may or may not be in Edward Hoyt's deploy is Gerald Kent. So we know that every time they're hot on the tracks of this crime, Wayne and Roland, you'll have the DA, who later becomes the Arkansas Attorney General, pop up and try to tamp this investigation down, making sure that it gets pinned on Woodard, then making sure it gets pinned on Tom Purcell. Is this guy a bad guy? Does he know everything?
I think he's guilty of being overly ambitious, and he has a lack of compassion or empathy. In his mind, I'm sure he could justify it. He could easily say, come on, it's Woodard. This guy, you see what he did at his house? Of course he did it. Or then just listen to the message. He knows enough information to make himself comfortable with what he believes. Is he culpable? No. Is he a dirtbag? Yes. So in the overall picture, I can't blame him because all he did was not seek truth. It's negligible whether or not he actually hindered the case. He just didn't care enough to get to what actually happened.
Yeah, he's just a henchman or a lackey, really. He's no more malicious than any other politician that just wants to get reelected or further their career. It kind of reminded me of all the politicians in Deadwood. They all knew what kind of place Deadwood was, but they weren't really interested in the lives of the people. They were just interested in making their own fortune in between the two.
I initially thought Kent's a son of a bitch. And then I really started thinking about it, and I go, there is a very good case to be made that this guy is just incompetent. Look at it from his perspective. If you're the DA, we got a guy who just shot up a bunch of cops. The backpack of the boy is at his house. They found the girl's sweater. Guys, fucking close the case. Like, what are we fucking around for? It's right there in front of you. Let's just be done with it. Now, add to that, imagine that he gets a phone call from Ed Hoyt. And Ed Hoyt's not saying, you better shut this the fuck down or anything like that. He's saying, listen, Gerald, this is really bad for our city. This is bad for our town. A lot of people are hurting over this. We need to bring this to a point. I'd really appreciate it if you could speed this process along so we can get this done. As a community advisor, as a leader in the community, you could see him very easily doing that. And again, with the Tom Purcell thing, it's like, guys, there's a fucking note. Mm-hmm. He shot himself clearly. Like, what is the problem here? Yeah. Just fucking not lock it down. It is very possible that this is a guy, like you said, King B, this is just his job. He's the DA. He's the attorney general. And he is a guy who can let it go. He wants to go home at night, have dinner with his family, get promoted.
And there's enough plausible deniability in his own head that he can sleep at night thinking he did the right thing.
Now, somebody who definitely did the wrong thing, Harris James. I don't think there's any debate that this guy is a bad guy. How much is he responsible for everything that happened? Is he just the cover-up man, or is he worse than that?
Now that you said that, you boxed me in. I was going to say I feel better about Harris James now than I did in the beginning. Because what did he really do? He wasn't out there trying to find Julie to kill her. He, helped out Hoyt on the traffic accident with Isabel. And then he helped, negotiate what was going to go on. In his mind, he could say, we're going to provide a better life for Julie. He's okay there. Then she escapes, and he was looking for her. And killing a junkie mom who sold her daughter off, I'll write that off. Nothing he did really for me. Planting the evidence was to throw them off the scent, because at that point, Julie had a better life. So what did he do that was all that wrong?
Honestly, I don't know how to respond to that. It's so awful and wrong. I mean, Harris James is probably one of the most nefarious characters in this whole story. You know, he's sort of the perfect liaison between these rich and powerful people and the people on the street that, you know, they want to manipulate. He is the guy that probably says to Hoyt, hey, I know how we can make this go away. I just need a backpack full of money. Hey, she's just a junkie. No one's going to miss her. Let me just fly down there and take care of this. Hey, I know how to shut this down. Give me that kid's backpack from evidence. You know, he's the one that really, I think, turns the crank on a lot of this stuff and makes it the evil cover up that it is. In the beginning, Junius, he's kind of a simpleton in a sense. Like, he just wants everything to be okay and just wants to care for Isabel. Harris James doesn't have that emotional bond. Harris James just goes, no, if you want to hide a crime, this is how you do it. Give me some money and some heroin.
Okay, I want to get a little mulligan. I forgot about the fake suicide with Tom. So I got to put him back in the bad column. I totally forgot about that.
And Dan.
Oh.
Yeah, don't forget, Dan showed up in the quarry, too. Or you think he was just out for a swim?
Yeah, but Dan, I'll let that go. But Tom, I can't. So he's back in the bad category.
So basically, Big D's rule is if you're lower class and poor, it's okay for cops to kill you and hide your body.
No, that's not at all what I'm saying. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying that he killed a grieving father who was looking for his daughter. You killing that junkie who's threatening to expose the fact that your employer, he wasn't molesting Julie. He was trying to give her a better life. So you can justify that. It had nothing to do with their socioeconomic, where their place in society. I could write that off. Killing Tom, no, I can't wave that away.
I don't think Harris James ever questioned whether or not he was doing the right thing. He was just doing it. Like, he didn't justify it to himself with, oh, we're giving her a better life. He doesn't care. He's there to make problems go away. That's his job.
Yeah, it's not like the Hoyts went out looking for him. Isabel wrecks her car. He's on the highway patrol and he's like, hey, you're rich. Let me help you out and stick to your family for years. If Harris James had been a good cop from day one, none of this shit would have happened. And what really bothers me is that, in the barn scene where he's being tortured, I said after that episode, clearly the reason why he's not talking is because what he's afraid of is so much worse than this impending doom from these two police officers. He would rather be tortured and potentially killed than to rat on his boss, because his boss is such a menace, such a monster, that it's no bullshit. He's just a fucking asshole. He thinks he can still get away with it. Nothing was scary enough to justify his behavior. Harris James is a vile piece of shit.
And he has red hair.
Took B all episodes to drop one. There it was. He threw the log out in front of Gene. Trip him up.
All right, gentlemen, that concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV, True Detective. We have one episode left as the season closes, which will be our final thoughts on season 3 of True Detective, plus your listener mail. That'll be The Watch coming up next week. In addition, we are firing up the American Gods podcast, which will be coming next week as well, so you can transition smoothly from True Detective to American Gods. And we still have Shat the Movies in play the whole time. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com. You can email us for next week's The Watch at hosts@shatontv.com. It is not too late to get in your final thoughts on the season. Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do that through PayPal, Venmo, or Amazon. Just go to shatontv.com/PayPal/Venmo or /Amazon and make a donation. We appreciate every dime and dollar. You also can help out by taking a survey at shatontv.com/survey, which will allow potential sponsors to find out what our audience likes and give us the money. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and the King Bee, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the final watch for season 3 of True Detective. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.